Welcome home. Two words that, as veterans, we yearn for day in and day out. We leave the places we had once called home and sometimes never find our way back. And that's why we're here at the Welcome Home podcast, talking about what it's like to transform from a soldier, service member, airman, sailor, what am I missing? Marine? Space cadet, wearing boots, to someday coming back to the civilian world and being a veteran. That's what this is all about. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Dylan Sessler. And today we've got a special guest, Eric Upchurch. And we're going to get into it. The point of this podcast is to be uplifting and talk about that transformational process. It is never ending. It's something we're continually working on. And there's no finish line. And it is necessary. Right? The transition is only that. It's a transition. But we have to transform the way we see the world, our mindset, and how we operate in order to be successful in this new endeavor in our lives. So welcome to the podcast, Dylan, Eric. Let's get right into it. Eric, let's assume I know nothing about you. Why are you on the podcast today?
Man, you said this is going to be uplifting? Okay. I got to change my mindset here a little bit. Actually, and on the mindset thing, maybe one of the reasons I'm on there is because I do a lot of podcasts, and mindset is a big thing for me personally. I have vision boards that kind of drive me across from my desk. Got my things, my gratitude and my accomplishments and goals, and I stare at them all day and make sure that my mind's right, so I can go out there and serve more people. So, but yeah, I'm a transitioned veteran. I served in 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment my whole time in service. I've been out for 12 years now, which is kind of crazy. Only did 6 years, finished as an E6. And, man, I moved from Savannah, Georgia, where I was stationed the whole time, to back to the Bay Area and San Francisco Bay Area. And for someone listening who's familiar with the Bay Area, you know, you go in from buying a $150,000 house in Georgia to, you know, the Bay Area, where the cheapest house I could find at the time, like in 2012, was about $500,000, and it was like an attached unit. So, you know, thankfully I had the VA loan and was able to pull it off, and didn't have any debt or anything like that. But yeah, the transition was real for me, and I was kind of talking with Dylan a little before the show that I loved my career in the military. I got to go to a lot of really cool schools and deployed 5 times to combat and led 27 soldiers and got them all to go to college and had just great career. But I also was the burial detail NCOIC. So anytime, just as an additional duty, so anytime we lost a Night Stalker, I had to drop what I was doing and then go to their hometown and do that whole thing. So what crept up on me was survivor's guilt. And so in transition, not thinking that I had anything wrong when I came home, because I loved what I did, super high op tempo, loved being out there with the guys and doing all that stuff. But then coming home and going like, what if something is going to hurt me later? And it all kind of came around full circle when I was getting off an exit ramp, and I saw guys holding a sign that said homeless veteran, anything helps or whatever. And I was like, man, I bet 20 years ago that guy had no idea he'd be standing there like this right now. And it just made me think maybe I owe it to my family, my wife and kids, to go to the VA and just have a conversation. Because in my unit, you are not allowed to go see a behavioral health specialist, or you lose your security clearance and go to needs of the Army. So what I recognized very quickly is that my transition was not going to be quite as easy as I thought it was going to be, even though I had a job right when I got out. So the money was there, but I had to keep that job too, right, in order to pay the bills. And so I went to the VA, and day one, I was introduced to some concepts like survivor's guilt and things, and I was in tears, and I am not an emotional guy. But the questions she was asking me were like, you know, she had me write out some of my experiences and read them out loud. Whew, man, that opened up a bag of worms. And from then on, for 3 years, I was in in therapy at the VA, just making sure my mind's right so I could go out there and kill it. Transition.
I think that's interesting. One of the challenges we have when we're going through that transition assistance program, where I always go back to TAPS, because that's really the pivotal moment, right? That is all right, you got, a week, 2 weeks left, or you're coming off, from a Reserve National Guard perspective, hey, you're coming off a deployment, you got 2-3 days of, transition training, and then you're a civilian, right? Within a week, you're back to being a civilian. And then the challenge there is they give you, 30 brochures and resources, and going to the VA is one of the things, right? And then you read the horror stories and you're like, no, that's the one thing I'm not going to do. And that's the one thing I absolutely 100% advocate for. Go there and at the very least, get a baseline. Get a baseline of your physical and mental health to see where you're at, and then start your annual checkups, because then you do it. And it's one thing that's normal and consistent when you're back home that keeps you in touch and grounded in reality. I know there's times where I've gone to my annual checkups, and it's like, all right, well, where is my physical health? And now I've known this guy for 10, 15 years. I open up to him about other things, and then he's encouraged me to go have other things looked at, right? And most times I talk about Building 43, because that's the behavioral health unit here in Milwaukee. We talk very open about Building 43, right? Because I was that classic, didn't go to the VA, then was all jacked up, then went to the VA, and then got myself back to not fucked up. And I was like, all right, I'm good now. I'm healed, right? 6 months of therapy, good to hook. Got busy working, like you said. And then the next deployment, I came home and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to therapy and check the box. And I did, and it was a mess. And now I've submitted to the fact that maybe I need some ongoing maintenance, right? And that's where I'm at, right? So it's a bi-weekly thing at the VA. And in line with that is you got to be your biggest advocate. I had a few counselors in there, especially during the COVID, where the one kid, I'll call him a kid, I had a virtual appointment with this kid, and I just steamrolled him for 45 minutes. I was like, well, that was fun, right? And I'm like, but that, like, I called and I was like, hey, remember that counselor I had like 12 years ago that beat the shit out of me in a mentally vaccinated way, kind of like what you said, write your shit down, then speak it out loud? Man, heavy. I'm like, yeah, that's the person I need. If I'm going to actually do this, I actually need someone that's more adult than me to really hold me accountable, right? And I even knew I needed a female, right? Because there's a less of a alpha male dominance, whatever that thing is. I felt more comfortable opening up to an older female than
more of a sympathetic voice too.
Absolutely. And then when she challenges me, she's not challenging me, she's challenging my assumptions, which are very different things. And that's something I had to work on, because I'm stubborn and defensive, like everybody, right, to a certain degree. Right? I don't know anyone that isn't stubborn and defensive, right? Because they're attacking your ego or your id, or I don't know, Dylan could probably tell you what they're attacking. Until you get defensive.
It's a representation of more than likely what you struggled with early on in your childhood, right? Like some kind of interaction in your childhood usually manifests itself whenever you're, quote unquote, triggered in some way, where you get upset, where you get angry. It's usually a very similar interaction to what you felt when you didn't have the ability to respond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just at a men's mastermind. I do commercial real estate, but I'm in a men's mastermind. We're up in Lake Tahoe, and one of the speakers was Dr. Kelly Flanagan. He's an author, psychiatrist, and he talked about the inner child and really exposed that in a cool way. And usually between 5 and 9 years old, there was some pivotal moment or thing that happened. It doesn't have to be some monumental thing like abuse or something like that, but something that defined who your inner child is now going to be for the rest of your life. And what that means, really, that inner child means, is what you kind of just explained, Dylan, is it's like when you feel triggered, it's a defense mechanism based on what that inner child needs, Yep. And it comes out in your relationships with your spouses and your friends and everything. And when you feel closed off in any situation, it's that reason. It's the inner child that is reacting to the thing. So,
I read about that in my book. That's exactly right. So I know, I didn't know this 6 months ago. This is probably when I was first introduced to this idea of the inner child. And when I heard it from Dylan, that was the second time I've heard it. And I've heard it a handful of times since. So I'm like, all right, Dylan's not full of shit. Right. And now you're verifying it. So, right. Even further proof of why Dylan's on this podcast. Right. He's just, right. And that's why you notice that transition. I just said something like remotely near the thing. And then Dylan actually completely, he swung through the pitch. Right. My inner child, and it's interesting you say 5 through 9, because I think about that period, and I'm really thinking about what was that. But for me, it's the idea of I'm not good enough. That's it. That is the chip on my shoulder. I'm not good enough, right? So whether it was being the smallest kid or never be able to live up to my dad's expectations or not living up to, like you said, a significant other's expectations, marrying a narcissist where you felt great one day and terrible the next, and you were the same person both days, right? I've chased this validation from others because I continually feel like I'm not good enough, right? And then now if I transition that to, okay, well, what can you do about it? Right now I use it as fuel. But I tell you, first time someone attacks me, I go back to not feeling good enough, like that, right? Yeah. It's like it's like building a snow mountain. You can spend hours and hours, right? And the plow truck comes by and it's scattered across the yard. I know you don't have to deal with that in San Francisco, but that's an idea that it takes weeks and months of saying good things to yourself, and in an instant it can go away, and that's what pops up. And even in the military, it was a struggle for me, whether it was with my fellow service members or coming back home and then feeling like, and I again talk about this often, is 2009 when I really hit my rock bottom was, okay, here I am, combat veteran, and I can't get a job because I'm not good enough. Because whatever I've done up until this point at 25 years old isn't even good enough to get remember I got turned down for a $9 an hour job. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, the economy was shit, and you're right. And so there was other contributing factors. And on top of it, I didn't have a lot of great experience. I worked a couple jobs in high school. I joined the military. I was off work for a year when I was homeless and traveling the country with a band. Like, not great work experience, right? So it wasn't a question of not being good enough. It was that's how I felt. And then once I realized that and started working construction and going to college, actually doing something about it, that's when everything started to change.
Yeah, I can relate to that. On my way out, I had a master's degree in aeronautical science. I had 6 years in the Special Operations Aviation Unit. I had my A&P license. I had all this stuff like just lined up, right? Mm-hmm. And I started applying to Northrop Grumman and Lockheed and Boeing and all of the aviation companies that we worked with to build our helicopters, and they were just not hiring. I mean, 2010 is when I'm applying, and so a similar thing. I'm like, wow, they're really not going to take me. They're like, well, a few years ago you would have been our top candidate, sure, but right now you're not enough to hire. Yeah,
I mean, when there's no seats on the bus, it doesn't matter how magical you are. No, I did. My background into you was I Googled you. I can't remember how we connected in the first place. Anyways, I Googled you and your not even DA photo, whatever. Your photo in your Class A shows up in your dress greens, and you got all the lickies and chewies. Like, you look like the guy on the poster that says "Be like this guy," right? You got.
We want you pointing in the poster.
I'm like, yeah, exactly. It's like it is the Airborne, Air Assault, Pathfinder, all the things, right? And it's like, wait, and then I'm some dirtbag E4. Right, with I don't even know, Army accommodation medal because I didn't die. Or that was, it's like, well, hey, if I can't get a job and this guy can't get a job, maybe it's not me individually. Maybe there's something else, right? You had a master's degree. I had a high school education, and not a very good one. I mean, the education was good. The GPA and other things weren't so hot, right? And I knew I had more in me, but so what? And so what? Mm-hmm. So when you came back, was that the plan? Was the plan wasn't real estate? The plan was, you got a master's in
aeronautical science. So the plan was to go work for some aviation company, probably Boeing or something, but because that didn't work out, I ended up in just a sales job, which is fine. But like most military members, and the way I co-founded a company called Active Duty Passive Income, and the way I stumbled into that was recognizing with a partner of mine, Markion, he's a Marine Corps helicopter pilot, We oftentimes become accidental landlords in the military. You buy a house, 100%, 100% leverage with a VA loan, decide to or can't sell it, don't have enough equity in it, and then you PCS to another place and you keep it and you rent it out. Accidental landlord, right? Huh. And so when I moved back to the Bay Area, I had my house in Savannah, Georgia still, and I was like, man, it's barely cash flowing. It's making like $80 a month. I wonder if I can do that better. And then it started, one thing led to another, and now we're buying thousands of units, and mostly commercial multifamily and storage, no single family stuff anymore. But it was just that kind of exploratory horizontal learning growth to see what I could do. And I think military members, to relate to this podcast, as they're transitioning, really capable. You just have to figure out what you can do right now, try it. If you like it, chances are you can be good at it. If you don't like it, learn something new. Treat it as a life lesson, move on, great education, do something else and see if you like that thing. And so I was doing that quite a bit over about a 5-year period until I found commercial real estate. But yeah, whether it's real estate or whatever your thing is, finding that passion and purpose. And, now we have 70,000 members that we're inspiring to buy real estate as they PCS around the world, really. We have 36 meetups worldwide. And so we're not even stuck in the US. I mean, we've got meetups in Kuwait and stuff. People are getting together, military members getting together and figuring out how to better their financial futures. So can't rely on the military to teach that stuff.
So what do you do? Are you selling this idea? Are you putting on classes? Are you putting on courses?
So ADPI is the leading military real estate investing education company. So we have the Military Real Estate Investing Academy, which is about 100 lessons. Teaches somebody how to buy 1 to 4 unit properties. And then we have the Military Multifamily Academy, teaches people how to buy 5+ commercial, like 100 unit apartment complexes and things. Yep. And then we have the Military Short-Term Rental Academy as well. So
what do you see are the challenges that, especially on the active duty side of the house, coming off of, whether it's a 6-year enlistment or 20-year with a retirement, what are the challenges that veterans are facing?
So the best way to, 100%, it is not knowing what to do next. We see that all the time. How do I start is always the first and most often asked question in our community. It will always be as well. Doesn't matter how long we continue on. The most asked question is, how do I get started? And the reason is, and I kind of started with this, Dylan, talking to you about it a little bit, but let me paint a picture for any civilians who are listening. And if they're not, all your audience will certainly understand this. And if they're transitioning, it will really help. So when you're in, you have a team, you have camaraderie, you've got a sense of purpose, mission. It's like a family. You have dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. You know where to be, what time, what uniform. You're given all that, right? Yep. That's like safety and control, all well in hand. You know your warrior tasks and drills. You're like on it, right? Everything's given to you. You earn it the hard way, but you know what to do and you get all that stuff. Your body receives all those awesome chemicals. And then at the end of the day, you get that cool RCOM, right?
Yeah.
So now when you transition, your body doesn't know that you're about to transition. Your chemistry inside you doesn't know you're about to transition. So you transition out. All of a sudden you lose your team, you lose camaraderie, you lose your sense of purpose and mission. You're surrounding yourself by people in a cubicle who could care less what you look like or when you show up. There's no more dopamine or serotonin. So what do? You see veterans not only committing suicide, but seeking adrenaline type activities, whether it's base jumping or skydiving or getting a motorcycle and going crazy on that thing or whatever. Or destructive relationships, attention, maybe they get arrested. Those are reactions because your body is going, whoa, I'm not getting what I had. I'm not getting that hit anymore. No one's saying my name. No one needs me to perform today anymore. And so people are getting arrested and doing all that stuff. It's destructive behavior in the wake of having no longer what was once given very deeply and thoroughly from the military. And so then you get this missing thing. So if a military member transitions and finds a new passion and purpose, it can be more of a seamless transition into, hey, I still get that hit, that dopamine hit. When Andy, if you say my name, I get that dopamine hit. Or if you tell me, hey, show up here on Monday, I get that dopamine hit and that sense of purpose. Like Andy needs me to show up on Monday at 6 a.m. and we're going to do this workout. He's counting on me to do that. If a military member who transitions finds that before they get out and has some kind of path, whether it's the right one or not, you got to have something to transition into, because guess what? You get out and you go sit in your mom's basement in Podunk, Indiana or something. You're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs. Mm-hmm. Dude, your mind goes, it's going to start going. It's going to start getting nuts, and some things that you do not need to be thinking about are going to start coming up, and then you'll start all of that destructive behavior. So I've seen it before, still burying friends, unfortunately, and you got to have something to transition into, which is another reason that we just got approved for as a DoD SkillBridge partner. We can hire military members transitioning. They still get their Army or Navy or whatever paycheck. Yep. And we get 6 months to train them up and give them some skills to go out there. And hopefully, even since we're a growing company, an opportunity to hire them full time.
Let's talk about SkillBridge. You know, a lot of what we talk about on the podcast here is, I would say doom and gloom, but it's more serious. Hey, take care of yourself. Yep. And even, you know, we're on episode 5 or 6 in the podcast. I'm sure Taylor put it in here, right? We're figuring out episode 6. We are figuring out our voice in this podcast. We really are. And that's why bringing people in from whether people we know or people that we don't know is so important, because we want to talk about the opportunities. Most times people reach out to me, and Dylan, I want to like to hear your feedback. Most times they're already, so it's already, not say too late, but it's way later in the process, mentally or, you know, physically, right? They've already transitioned. They've already come home. They've already failed a few times at things. You know, I like what you said there about, it's better to be on the wrong path. Well, it's better to be on a path, right? Because no path is the kill zone. So let's put this in right away, right? And say, if you do nothing, that is the kill zone. Nothing is the kill zone. Because then everything that involves around nothing leads to your mom's basement, leads to the bar, leads to swiping right late into the night, right? That's what nothing leads to. Now, a path is at least a path, right? You might stumble and fall on said path. You might find another fork in the road along that path, and you're on a path. And that's important. So I'd love to hear about, let's talk about this path of SkillBridge. I only recently heard about it. I know it's active duty type. What do you know about it? Because the sooner guys can get into, right, this idea of, hey, at least get on a path, right? Even if it's for a company for 6 months and the company's getting paid or compensated by the U.S. government, I tell you what, there's a lot of companies out there that will shake the dice for 6 months with somebody. As an employer, I would love to bring on some guys through the SkillBridge program, knowing that part or their entire wage is covered, so long as the skill set they're learning. So let's talk about what you know about SkillBridge from the veteran's perspective.
Yeah, so from a veteran's perspective, you can go, it's like skillbridge.osd.mil or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But if you just Google DoD SkillBridge, it'll pop right up. And you can literally just go search for companies, and there's a couple thousand of them right now, and that have gone through the approval process. You have to have a training plan in place. You have to have an MOU, and you have your application, and it takes several months to get approval. Mm-hmm. But from a veteran's standpoint, you go in there and you click a link and you go, oh, that company does this. I'd like to learn this. Let's see what opportunities they have open. And then you just contact them, and then you literally, up to 6 months, when you're on your way out, you can not go into work at say the Army, and you go work virtually or wherever. Maybe it's local company, but you go work virtually even, and you still get your Army paycheck, and the company is not allowed to pay you anything, which is fine because they're getting free work from you.
Yep.
So It's a great program.
This is, I'm looking at it. Yeah, so it is skillbridge.oscar.delta.mil. And so is this for anybody that is active duty? Even someone that's does 4 years, they can spend the last 6 months of their contract doing this?
That is a good. No, it's not retirees only. It's anybody transitioning out. They do have to get approval through their direct chain of command, but that's just printing off the paperwork and having them, sign it. And by that time, they know that you're on your way out and you're doing your out processing stuff and your levy briefs and whatever you have to do, right?
Retaining you isn't on the board anymore. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yep.
Do you know if this is a guard or reserve program at all?
I do not know.
I looking at it on the top here is at active duty. It's only active duty from what they're saying.
Gotcha.
But no, that's interesting. And so I've heard about SkillBridge a few times now, and that's huge because historically the DoD is we call it the big green weenie, right? You're leaving? Sounds good, right? Don't let the door hit you with a good Lord split you, and that's kind of it, right? That and then you wonder why veterans struggle so much. Was it 40% of veterans leave their first place of employment within 2 years? It's like they fantasize about the job that they want, but if the last time they were a civilian, they were 17, 18 years old, now they're in their late 30s, early 40s, the idea of what the civilian world is and what the civilian world is, there's a huge delta there.
It's even worse now because you think you can go out and be TikTok famous, so why do I need this W-2 to go in?
I can tell you,
take my chances with YouTube or something.
From personal experience, you don't make a ton of money off of TikTok.
No,
unless you're just really good at it, right?
The top 1%, the top 1% of 1% of 1% of anything can get paid.
Yeah.
Right. If you're in the top 100 chess players in the world, you're probably taken care of. Actually, I played volleyball for years. And one of my buddies was telling me there's like less than 50 volleyball players, that make a living playing volleyball in the entire world. And that is winning tournaments, sponsorships, appearances, everything. Right? If you're thinking about doubles, that is basically 25 teams or less that make money year-round playing volleyball. It's like everybody else out there, it is an additional duty, if you will. And a lot of these guys are training 40 hours a week, right? And then they all have side hustles and jobs to actually pay their bills on top of their travel and all this other stuff. So, yes, the idea that you can get onto YouTube or TikTok or anything, there is an idea that I've seen, especially with veterans, and maybe it's just our can-do attitude or dream state, that once I get out or once I get home, life will become magically easier or simpler. And that's the farthest from the truth. I find it very interesting you talk about the dopamine hits and the constant reinforcement of proper or of right behavior. Never thought about it that in depth. I've always looked at it as simple because you got your day is mapped out for you. But yeah, you're consistently getting those little dopamine hits. Like, oh hey, good job. You made it to formation.
Yep.
You're wearing the same uniform as everybody else. Good job. Yep. You look like everybody else.
Didn't get chewed out today. All right.
Didn't get you. Oh yeah. Actually, in the military, I tell people that if you look around and don't see anybody, that is the scariest feeling in the world. That's it. I don't.
Frantically driving to the nearest location that you could possibly think.
Yeah. I don't care if you are knee deep in name that place that we can't talk about, Middle East, or you are on the most podunk military installation in the States. When you look around, and you're the only one there. You instantly are like, I got to be wrong. I have to be doing something wrong. I need to return back to where other people are because I'll feel less wrong there for whatever magical reason.
And then you think about how much pain you're going to be in the rest of the day for doing push-ups all day long. And
oh yeah, I can remember one time I was sleeping in the bathroom on a Sunday or something, and I woke up and they had a formation. I looked outside, I saw the entire company having a formation, and I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm dead. I'm gonna write my obit right now. There's no way I survive this. Like, what the fuck? And turns out someone was like, oh, he's at church. Like, they just and that was it. And again, like, it is a nothing burger of a moment in my life.
Imagine if you walk out.
Oh god,
walk out.
Well, that's the thing. I looked out and I was like, what do I do? This is a no-win situation.
Yeah.
Right? And because if the drill sergeant comes in and I'm still in the barracks, there is no good answer. And whatever it was just like a checking on everybody, kind of, garbage formation. whatever, mid-morning, and then all of a sudden people were back in and I just stayed in the bathroom the whole time. And then when the guys came out, hey, formation, yeah, no big deal, right? And I'm a forever reservist with a couple deployments, so it's like my time on active duty, I'm high alert because my assumption is I'm wrong at all times, which has served me well in the military up until this point. Now, again, do what your rank can afford. Now I have a desk job and a laptop and a gov. So it's a little bit different. Now I can go where I want with with some level of certainty that I'm not in trouble. And there's not much whatever. I got 19 years in. I'm taking her easy, as they say. All right. So what else are you seeing? Because you got out 13 years now. So when you got out? Did you just go in the IRR? Or what did that? What further obligation did you have for the military, or that was it? 2 years of IRR?
I had 2 years IRR, which was, I think, 2 musters or something, but that was just to make sure I was still breathing.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't even put the uniform on. It was just a check-in,
Yeah.
That's it.
And what involvement now, outside of your organization, do you have with service members or veterans?
I mean, we got all of it now. I mean, we've got every branch, 70,000 military members, past and present, and their families. And then, part of what I do also is I raise money for a nonprofit that puts veterans off the streets. It's a Veterans Community Project, and it builds tiny homes for homeless veterans. They're not tiny homes on wheels. They're slab construction, granite countertops, nice flooring, and sidewalks to interweave through with fire pits, and it's gorgeous little communities. And there's like six towns now, I think, that have them. And so last year, and this is part of passion and purpose and finding that and transition. Last year, I hosted with 12 of my real estate investor buddies a 170-mile hike around Lake Tahoe. It's 9 days, 40 pounds, 20 miles a day. No bathrooms, no water, no campgrounds. We raised $190,000 for Veterans Community Project. And this year we're doing the rim to rim to rim Grand Canyon hike, which is about 50 miles in one day. So we're going to raise $100,000 for that. And so that's another way.
50 miles rim to rim to rim. Explain that to me. What is that?
So
Exactly?
South Rim at one trail of the Grand Canyon, you go down to the Colorado River and then up to the North Rim.
Okay.
And then back down the same trail back to the river and then up a different path. So you're literally going from the top of the rim down to the water, top of the other rim. So you're hiking all the way across the Grand Canyon and then all the way back in one day.
Wait, not the whole Grand Canyon.
From side to side. Yes.
Left to right.
Down into the valley and then back up and then down and then back up. Yeah.
Because the Grand Canyon is a lot bigger than 50 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying.
But about 50 miles across. Yeah.
Yeah, this way. Yeah, okay. The short way. All right, so hold on. 50 miles one day?
Yeah. About between 20 and 22 hours.
How many guys are doing that?
We've got a call, probably maybe a dozen. Maybe a dozen. Yeah.
And so does everyone just have a bunch of people that sponsors them for that?
Yeah, we'll just raise money through our individual our individual, friends and family and stuff.
When is that taking place?
It's May.
May what? I'm just if there's anybody listening. Is it open?
Yeah,
to other
we're
people?
We're still taking applicants right now, and the more the merrier. I mean, we'll raise $100,000, so that'll go directly to VCP.
As much as I would love to do that, I don't know. I can do 50 miles right now.
Got to train for it. Get on that Stairmaster.
I did 25. Like woke up and did it 2 years ago, and with a 50-pound pack, and just cranked it out like it was nothing.
Yeah.
That was a couple. Well, I had 2 good knees back then, so I don't know.
Doing hard things is something that I do now for my. I kind of do it selfishly because it helps me keep out of my head, and also when I feel the pain of hiking 170 miles or the pain of this trip. I just did a 70.3 Ironman with 0 training in December.
You just cranked it out.
I just cranked it out, and the reason. So I didn't swim, bike, or run in training for it. All I do is walk on the treadmill for cardio. So, but mile 38 on the bike, after swimming 1.2 miles, I'm at mile 38 on the bike, and my thighs are just dead. But when I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like so dead that I'm sitting up biking with no hands and using my triceps to push my legs down, like my arms to crank my legs. And I still had to go to 56 miles on the bike and then run a half marathon after that.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about the pain and the suffering. But what really makes me keep going is the guys that I buried. And I just think if I can continue and experience this pain, this is their best day. They would love to be able to be here and feel that. And so I use those experiences now as a way to drive me to do crazy things that are not dangerous. Like, I'm not going to get hurt, get like killed from doing crazy things, but painful, hard things. And I'll raise money on it also. I raise awareness and then get our brothers and sisters off the streets. There's 32,000 homeless veterans, and we're ending veteran homelessness this decade. Got 7 years to do it, and it's going to happen. I just told you right now, it's going to happen. It's also on my vision board. So it was 38,000 2 years ago. So massive reduction. 6,000 homeless veterans off the streets in the last 2 years.
And so I'm familiar with tiny homes. I don't know if there's several organizations. We have one here. It's they had 22 homes, 24 homes. I love the concept of that down in Racine. I know they wanted to bring it to Milwaukee. I think it was dead on arrival.
Actually, Veterans Community Project is working with an organization there now. They actually have 3,000 cities that signed up for Veterans Community Project. Yep.
This is what I love about it. What I love about it is with the tiny homes is that you can't have food or drink essentially in the home, or you can, but there's no cook. Is that how at least the one down here was?
Yeah, these are 280 to 320 square feet. There's full kitchens in them.
Oh, there's.
There's a bed. There's everything. And then when the veteran moves to an apartment, when they transition, they get to take everything. They get to take
inside.
They get to take the TV, the bed, the couch, the chair, all of the pots and pans, everything. Yep.
So the one down here, if I'm almost positive, they leave it where you can't cook or store food in there because the whole goal is to get people into the community room, and people, right? You're it's one of those intentional, intentionality leading to organic conversations to really build a community, right? Because it's about having the community, having veterans that, can look to their left and right and not have to swallow their pride, right? They can be proud of where they're at today because it was better than where they were yesterday. And then look to the fellow vets as a resource, right, for camaraderie and everything else under the sun. So you're talking 32,000 homeless vets. How do we end homelessness in 10 years or 7 years?
Well, I'm going to raise $250 million in the next couple years, and that's it. I mean, VCP is already going out there and engaging with local city officials in a lot of different cities. Yep. And I just introduced them to a senator in Oklahoma City, and now they're starting one there. And so it's just a matter of connections, and then you've got to obviously buy the land or have it subordinated or donated. So it's just a process, and money. VCP is not taking any money from the government because one of the issues taking money from the VA or just the government in general is that they will stipulate that it can only be honorable discharged veterans. Which is not appropriate for helping people who volunteered to serve. There's other than honorable. I don't care if you're dishonorable discharge. You might have got a dishonorable discharge for getting a DUI. That doesn't mean that you're some shitbag. It means you made a wrong decision. You still deserve to not be homeless. So they've chosen to take only private funds up until now. So no one better to help veterans than veterans anyway,
No, I love this. I had a conversation with someone earlier today, a consultant, who had called me because there was a local American Legion that reached out to him and said, hey, basically we want to hire you as a consultant to make the American Legion relevant. And I went on about a 15-minute tirade talking about how we don't need another organization, or in this case, the American Legion, which has done historically great things for veterans, but now has lost their identity. And I even said that, there's going to be another veteran organization that comes up from the ashes of the legions and the VFWs of the world and takes care of veterans, right? We have a new mission. Actually, sitting here, I got my American Legion cup, my American Legion Wisconsin cup I'm drinking coffee out of, right? Because I want to support the Legion, and they've been limited through the years because of their own bureaucracy or the funds that they take. And now it's within us veterans, so we might not want to follow the bureaucracy or the stagnation of the VFWs and the American Legions of the world. We want to take care of each other. So whether, our first episode, we had Donnie O'Malley, who started Relevant Warriors, right, in the hikes that he does. And that's important. What you're doing now is important because it's not bleeding heart individuals that have a great idea and a little bit of funding. It's actual veterans actually doing something. And that's huge because you're right. We look to our left and our right. We don't see we don't ask what type of discharge is on your DD-214, the old, was it the 24 alpha block or 24 block, right? Like everywhere else you go, that's the first thing they ask for, right? They want the full DD-214, whatever the copy one, and whether it's the bank or whomever, right? Because they want to see that honorable discharge. I've thought about it, but I love how intentional you're being by saying if you're a vet, you're a vet.
Yeah.
That's it.
Volunteered.
Yeah.
To be up front where the fighting is hard.
Yeah.
Person on the other end of that asking for that DD-214 doesn't get to say which one was most important, and they don't know the whole backstory of why it was other than honorable, So
or even voluntold. I mean, there's still veterans out there that were drafted.
Yeah. And there's veterans out there too who were voluntold by a judge. You're either going to jail or you're joining the military.
Is there any? Help me understand this. We got the jokes, and I'm sure it's in TV. I've never met someone where that applied to them.
I met a guy in AIT.
Did you? Okay.
And he was like, judge straight up told me I'm either going to jail or I'm enlisting.
Okay, all right. I believe you.
It was his last chance to get straight. He'd been in like juvenile hall since he was probably 13 or something. I don't know the whole story, but yeah, he straightened him out though. It's good. He's a good kid.
Huh. Well, I mean, it's one thing the military is good for, right? A lot of people talk about, right, especially in the world we live in today, about equal opportunity and seat at the table. If you raise your right hand, the military is going to take it, right? That's the thing. They'll take just about anybody and everybody, right? So long as you can, pass height, weight, PT, because that's important, because you can't be a liability to the rest of the team. And the military, I'm not saying they've perfected it, but when you're all embracing the suck together, a lot of those things go away. And we carry that. I look at it as a strength that we carry. There's, when we come back to the civilian world, there's a lot of people that I would never have interacted with that saw the world differently. They looked different than me. They grew up in a different area than me, had it not been for the military.
Yep.
Especially, in the reserves and National Guard, we get a more homogeneous population because generally people are geographically located, Mm-hmm. But when you're overseas, active duty type, anybody and everybody can be from anywhere.
Yep.
Not just in this country, but others. There's plenty of people coming from other countries that want nothing more than to join our military and be part of this American dream.
I had a guy, two guys in my squad come to mind that were, one guy was born in the Bayou in Louisiana, and another guy was Dominican, raised in Brooklyn. And you couldn't even imagine different upbringings,
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. You make it through special operations qualification course, you can drag that person across the finish line. You're part of the team. So you're definitely you look at these people as assets, not as, oh, you're different than me or whatever. And that's one thing the military, I think, does really well.
Yeah, I see it. It builds. It takes a 1,000 different cultures and forces you to adapt to kind of one singular culture. And you could even say subcultures of MOSs, right? Like we ask each other, like, "What's your MOS?"
Yeah.
And infantry guys are feel like if you say anything other than 11 Bravo, they're just like, you're a pogue. I don't want to talk to you. Right. Like, and so you have that subculture that says we're the best subculture. Right. And then you've got other subcultures that look at infantry and like, well, we supply you. So clearly we're more important. Right. And so like, it's this hyper competitive culture of subcultures. And that's really interesting. And it brings me back almost to what you were talking about earlier, Andy, with the idea of like not being good enough. Like the Army is, and you could say this for pretty much every branch, but the Army specifically and the Marines specifically are really good at using shame to make people better at what they do. Right? Like we use culture and we've adapted this, and I'm not saying it's a good thing. It just is a thing that shame has been implemented in how we adapt people to go from being a recruit with relatively no skills to being a infantryman or an airman or whatever with confidence, pride, appreciation for what they have, skill set, and then becoming competitive in their job set to do effective work. And that's, and it in some ways, it brings in people that are, kind of looking for that leg up of like, I don't feel good enough. And we find it, because I'm not much different than you, Andy. If like, I never had an appreciation for, whether I was good enough. I was always looking for someone else's approval. But it finds people like that. And the interesting thing, and the question I've always kind of wondered about is, does the Army really do a good job, or does the military really do a good job of solidifying that identity? Or does it put a layer over that identity and just push it to the end of the line, right? Like the green weenie, right? When you're about to get out, you've got this layer of potentially false confidence, and maybe it's confidence, that people don't know how to deal with the trauma. They don't know how to deal with the identity crisis, the shame, the guilt, the regret, and not just from the military, like survivor's guilt, like you, but everything that came before. And is there some film or shield that we're handing out from the Army that isn't really preparing people for stepping into this reality that I have to live, and I have to find a way to enjoy life. I have to find a way to step into society with some kind of confidence and appreciation for what everybody else has been through, not just what I've been through.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my question.
Relationships,
right?
Everything.
It's a big question.
It is a film there, and it's like for us, in the niche we're in now, we don't rely on the military to teach financial literacy and teach how to invest. That's our job now. It's our job. It's a way we can serve after service. But the military, you get a crash course on how to invest in the thrift savings plan on the heels of a 4-day weekend safety brief. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Don't get drunk. Don't make more people.
Don't die.
Don't go to jail. Don't die. Invest in TSP. See you later.
Yeah.
And so it's not the military's job. And so they do as much as they need to make it look like, oh, we care about your transition, because we're telling you to go at all these taps, whatever that, Dylan, you and I talked about this, didn't even go to any.
Yeah.
And so it's like, here's the thing that you can learn about. And it's just bland. It's just like checking a box. Even the people teaching the shit, it's just bland. Like they barely know anything, or it's like an Edward Jones financial advisor that's in there trying to make a buck, Yeah. And I don't know. So it's not like war fighting and defending is the military's job. It's not to help transitioning military members. It's something that they're trying to add on to make it seem nice, but it's obviously not working well, So,
I mean, our job in the military is to win wars. Yep. That's it. That is the mission statement, right? Win wars. And having a job when you come home does not fall in line with that. You know, and the reserves, I think we do somewhat of a better job because we need you to be sound mind outside of drill so you can come to drill, so you can get ready to go to war. When you're active duty type, it's like you're either on or you're off. And so the transition assistance program is, again, it is check the box because it doesn't fit the overall commander's intent, right? If they want you to win wars, I'm not saying they want you to fail and come crawling back to the Army, which some may argue, right? Because I've heard that before, right? It's like they're designed for failure, so you stay in, and I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I've heard it. They're over it, and they're gonna go recruit a new body. And let's be honest, the government's not great at a lot of things. Them preparing you for the civilian world, not their niche.
It's not what they're built for, yeah.
Not what they're built for, not their responsibility. So this idea, again, we can get pissy and moan with the transition assistance. No, check the box, figure out the half a dozen things that they tell you that are accurate, right? And then go from there. We had a gentleman on the podcast earlier. He wrote a book called From CEO to CEO. And he said the first thing you do is don't listen to all the shit they told you in transition assistance program. Well, that's lesson number one, right? And the only argument I'd say there, and he did concur on this, is, well, go to the VA and get your shit documented at the very least, right? Whether you apply for disability or not, whatever. Yeah. But at the very least, get a baseline. And then beyond that, figure it out. And civilians are, and veterans that have transitioned, those are the people that know how to operate in this new landscape. Those are the people you got to lean in on. I love what you're doing with your company because you've done it, you've proved it out, and now you're giving people a clear path to success in a consulting aspect. Like, hey, if you want to do this, this is the way to do it. If you don't, also cool, right? And then you're leaning on a skill bridge, and you're giving back to a vulnerable population because it's not that everyone's going to be fit for the career field that you're in, but everyone can get behind how do we support fellow veterans.
Yeah, and like content management developer is like the types of jobs that we're doing. Content management and development is what everyone needs right now, every business. So yeah, that's what we need too. And so we're taking people. In fact, DoD Skill Bridge, the best thing DoD did was create the Skill Bridge program. And I think they need to, it's doubled in size in the last couple of years, and they need to keep on pushing that because it really does make an impact. In fact, I hired my old company commander. He is a 28-year 06 when he was in Special Operations Command all the way through. He was at 06 at USACOM in Tampa when I hired him to come work for our company after 28 years.
And what is he doing for you?
And he's our director of lending for our mortgage branch.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he went through the Skill Bridge program to come work for us, and then, I mean, he's a brilliant guy. I mean, he was flying Blackhawks at the highest levels, and whatever. So,
that's the other thing I find interesting is, especially in your community. It's like you go from being the best, like you have all the ability in the world to learn a new skill set, and yet we hear that you guys, right, in the special operations, come back and struggle because of just how different the world is.
Yeah, one of the hardest things I had to learn was that my experience is a frame of reference. So when I hear somebody, I use this analogy or just this example pretty often. If I go into a coffee shop or something and somebody's complaining that their coffee is cold or the line's too long or whatever it is, one of the hardest things that I had to learn was that person's frame of reference is not mine. Mm-hmm. That person, that's a real problem to that person right now. And to me, it looks like the stupidest thing you could even imagine. When people are getting shot at, people are taking their lives, people are getting killed and killing people. And this person's sitting there complaining or yelling or doing whatever they can, acting out in something that's just the most petty thing ever. And so you want to just kick that person in the ass and yell at them and do whatever. But then you look like the ass because everyone also around you didn't have your experience either. So that's where you see the angry vet who lashes out somewhere and everyone's, makes the news and, oh, this veteran does this or that. It's because he didn't recognize that he's got to understand that that's their frame of reference. It's just as valid as his. It's just different. Yeah. And that was really hard for me to kind of to figure out. And that's how you keep your job. If you want to keep a job, you have to be realistic about the fact that your boss might suck, but that's his reality. And he might be an asshole, but you can't be yelling at him.
Even more importantly, that's how you maintain a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest things that that I think is the issue when I say like the Army doesn't prepare you or the military doesn't prepare you. It gives you that film of confidence that you can, you're a warrior, good for you. But then you step out into the civilian world and then you have this frame of reference that you don't really understand how to empathize with other people. You don't really understand how to have a compassionate relationship with another human being because for so long the Army told you that you really you have to figure out your shit, and so it's a form of like self-centered focus, thought processing that doesn't really prepare you to look at another human being and saying, I can support you, but I also have needs. Right. The reality is like my needs come first, and you're stepping in the way of my happiness because you have a fucking problem. Right. Like that's kind of the mentality that I've seen from a lot of fellow veterans that are struggling through like relationship issues is exactly what you're talking about, is this frame of reference, this perspective. They can't take someone else's perspective for a moment just to understand what's going on. They can't empathize because they've been so focused on how they have to approach their decision making that they've never really looked at it that way, outside of like being in the infantry squad, right? And having to think, what's the best thing for the team, right? Like people don't think what's the best thing for the relationship. And if they do it in a way that is unhealthy for the relationship. It's like, what's the best thing for the relationship? I'm going to take all of the trauma that I saw in Afghanistan and I'm not going to talk about it at all. Right? I'm going to bury it down deep and then I'm going to live my life. And then what happens? You get angry, you get upset, you have these bodily feelings that cannot be stopped because you're not actively processing your trauma. And then outbursts happen. That builds a number of different mental health issues, depression, anxiety, bipolar, all sorts of different major issues. And then you can't have a relationship, right? Or you ruin the relationship, or you take on all sorts of problems.
There's a lot of scenarios where relationships can get ruined after the service because of the stuff you're talking about. And then even during, I had 27 guys, or aviation MTO is a little bit different. So 27 guys in my squad, a platoon size element that I was in charge of. And about 22 of them were divorced under the age of 28. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, okay. And now looking back at it now, it's like, and you guys know, when you deploy and you come home, man, you have to tiptoe because your spouse or whoever's been taking care of the stuff has got it. They've got it figured out. They've got soccer practice figured out. They've got meals figured out. Yep. They've got the work thing figured out. They've got how to pay all the bills figured out. And then you come back and you're like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to do all these things. And that's stress. That's bringing stress into the equation. So you have to tiptoe in and say, what can I do? But most people don't. That's not taught anywhere, So reintegration into your own family is not taught. It's supposed to be like this joyous thing and everything goes back to normal. But it's not. People come back and then they split. Yeah.
It's joys for a day, and then it's a painful communicative struggle. Is I think the best way to explain that, because you have to both integrate into their lives, right? Like if you have a family, children, you have to step into their lives and say, how do I fit in now? But they also have to look at you and recognize, like, how can we bring you in? And, there's two sides to this coin. One, a veteran needs to be able to look at that scenario and recognize the necessity for patience. And when you're on a deployment, you don't fucking have that. And then on the other side of the coin, we don't teach families to bring soldiers back home. This is exactly the purpose of what we're doing here is at some point we need to explore that and recognize, like, what can a family do to look at a veteran and say, this is what we can help you with, right? This is what we need to help you with, and you need to allow us to help you with that. Because there is a process, right, that we are obviously actively failing at as, I think, a nation, right? Like in the past 20 years, we've had families that have tried and failed, and obviously we've lost people. And we need to really look at that process a little bit differently and approach it from as a community of veterans in a way that actually brings something to light that can be used for future generations and future warriors.
So, I got back from Gitmo in 15. We know there was a Yellow Ribbon program that we went to with our families. The challenge is it was 3-4 months after we got home. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff they were talking about is like, oh, that's why I blew up that day. That's why I had an issue there, right? So it's like, well, that wasn't great, right? It's like, yeah, we checked the box, but I remember going to Yellow Ribbon with my new girlfriend after I already filed for divorce. It's like, well, that probably could have helped 6 months ago. I made it 6 days. I got home on a Saturday, and on Friday, my now ex-wife asked for a divorce, right? I mean, that's how not, right? Because it's like, no, hers actually was the opposite. She wanted me to come in and fix all the problems. Like, hey, I need you to do all, and like, so now these expectations were, hey, you're just going to fold in. And she was living in a new city that I'd never been to. Yep. So it's like, well, I remember the one day I had to Google how to get to Chipotle, and I had a fucking breakdown. So I'm like, I don't know why I'm here. It was Peoria, Illinois. Why the fuck am I here in Peoria? I'm not from here. This is not my hometown. I'm not getting a fucking job here. Like, no, I don't. And she moved there when I was in the middle of the deployment. So it's like, I never fucking been there before. And so the Army does it in some capacity, but we need to have those conversations early and often, and have people willing to listen. You said, 22 out of 27 members of your squad, platoon size element, were divorced, and it's like, that's an epidemic, right? And it's like, well, what can we do? And again, it's absolutely a two-way street and two-way conversation. Yeah. And the biggest thing is, Dylan talks about this all the time, is, leading with empathy. It's understanding right off the bat that you're not unique. I was talking to my book writer earlier today about where we're at in the book writing process, and I'm having doubts and all that shit. And she's like, hey, just so you know, Andy, like, I've written 50 books, and everyone goes through this at this moment. And it's like, I needed to hear that, right? As unique as you think you are, and everybody is, there are certain things that are part of the human condition.
I've been there.
There you go. There's your book, right? There you go, right? Okay,
not easy.
Right? Exactly. It's like, For those of you guys you guys are listening only, Dylan, and Eric. You see that? I combined it both names. Combined it. Derek, codename Derek, showed off their books. They, right? Pronoun usage. Yeah, there we go. Taylor just jumped in. Yeah. Thanks, Taylor. Their producer just hopped in and told me to wave my book that I don't have around. And it's like, so it's like, hey, maybe we'll have a veterans. We wrote a book. How much did it suck club, right? And like that'll be a good club, right? So, but that's it. Like in the military, you're told from day one you're not special and you're not unique. And it's like, now when you come home, guess what? This is what you're going to struggle with. And here are some tools. It sounds so stupid how simple some of these tools are, and you like laughing at that stupid smile on your face if you've ever been through couples counseling before. You're like, God, this is so simple, but it's like, how can we not have this conversation together? And it's like, well, you had to wait till, you were divorced, or, like even I had to see my ex-wife today when I dropped off my daughter. And it's like, it's been 8 years and I still can't stand the look of her face. Right. I just, right. It's like 7 years or whatever it's been. And it's like, I needed training on this shit, and I'm still working on it and learning about it, but I have such pent-up frustrations because I think I'm unique. And I think my situation's unique. And it's not.
You're not unique. You're not special. But another way to look at it is you're not alone.
There you go. Yeah. And again, that's why we have this podcast. Life is complicated. Being in the military and coming back to the civilian world is complicated. And when you understand what's around the next corner, it becomes simpler. Right, in the military, think about it. We have rock drills and we have training and we have intel and we have the latest reports and you don't put boots on ground until you've rehearsed it 1,000 times. How many times did you rehearse a conversation with your significant other that was going to be uncomfortable?
Yeah.
As little as possible.
Right? Avoid, package it up, tiptoe,
Abort.
like you said, tiptoe, landmine, right? That's it. We are so conditioned to being conditioned that when all of a sudden the conditions are different, we can't, right? And because veterans show up one of two ways: exactly how they are in the military, or the complete opposite. And chances are those are two poor courses of action, right? Because you can't get away from what you're best at, right? Who you are in the military, and you also can't be who you are in the military at all times, because that ain't gonna work. I remember I came home from Gitmo, and my daughter was like 18 months old, and I hadn't really seen her since she was 6 months. And I'm like, she's walking and talking and thinking and talking back to, not really talking back, but like having her own opinions.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there having a conversation with her about cookies and muffins, and just telling her I don't negotiate with terrorists, because that's I don't know what to say. Like, right, in Gitmo, we don't refer to them as terrorists, but like detainees, like we don't negotiate with detainees, and like it's a yes or no and that's it. And I walk away. And with her, it's like, well, now I'm negotiating with an 18-month-old, and I'm like, how can I not get you to comply? This is not difficult. But it was complicated. She didn't get it.
It's not waterboarding, I'll tell you that.
Well, easy. Camp X-Ray was only 98 days and gave Gitmo a bad rap. By the time I went to Gitmo in 14 and 15, it was so scrutinized. You mean you couldn't let a fart out with someone else knowing? Like, it was.
Yeah, I bet.
It was not fun. It wasn't terrible. It was actually really, really simple. It was boring. Just boring. It was the same shit, 12 hours a day. That's it. And then you left, and the next people came in for the same shit 12 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So, nothing exciting about Gitmo. I don't know. Maybe you and your buddies jack things up. I don't know who. Somebody jacked things up to start with. By the time I got there, we were playing cleanup. All right. We beat the dead horse. We know we're going to transition. We know we're not unique. What do you got, Dylan? Starting with you. Top takeaways from today's conversation.
Let me pull up.
Dylan takes notes.
I just find it. I find it fascinating where people take their passions, and I think it's incredible that you've already built a community with the active duty passive income. I've been a part of it for a while. I haven't been very active, but I do enjoy it. And then on top of that, you've looked at the grief, the survivor's guilt, the people that you've lost, and you use them as a form of fuel, and that's incredible. I think it's important that we have an ability to express those feelings, those things that are inside you, that you have some form of connection to it, because it's not going to go away. And for any veterans who are listening to this and are struggling with things like that, you do need to actively build a connection to it. And I think that's remarkable that you do that, Eric. And then on top of that, you give back to the community with the Veterans Community Project and the many other things that you're involved with. So I take that away as I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
I appreciate that. And I'll just say, and kind of on theme, I'm not special in these things that I'm doing after service. I continue to serve my brothers and sisters in arms, which benefits me. And so if you're out there, the one word that I think should be said louder and prouder and everything is serve. If you go out with a mentality of, I'm going to figure out a way to serve, you're going to be smiling more. You're going to be feeling like, you'll start getting that dopamine hit when you're serving just because you can. And you'll find your own community. You'll find your niche. You'll find your brothers and sisters again.
Yep.
So, transition and go out with service. You've been serving your nation. Go out and continue to serve your nation as a civilian.
Yeah, that's it. Transforming your pain into passion to find your purpose within service for your community. If you can, when you do that as a veteran, you will live a fulfilling life. And the path that you start on will be rocky and muddy and crappy and all those things, right? Which is where we thrive, by the way. And then eventually it'll become more clear. It might not, it might suck. It might be 50 miles down and 50 miles back up, and it will suck, but you got to embrace it and get on the path. Yep. So I appreciate your guys' time. Eric, thank you for your service. I'm going to say that. Not the BS fucking Army, thank you for your service. I fucking hate that. No, thank you for the way you continue to serve veterans, right? And all spectrums. Those that, right, need a hand up, right? And also those that want to give the hand up. So, Eric, I do appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your insight, and thank you for continuing to serve the veteran community. Dylan, thank you as always for joining us, co-hosts, Brother in Arms, here on the Welcome Home podcast. For all you listeners out there excited, thank you for joining us in another week on the Welcome Home podcast, where we talk about that transformation from troops and boots to veterans in the civilian world. We will see you next week.